So it's 1:30, so welcome everybody to the August 18th Planning Commission meeting. The first item on the agenda is the opening announcements, please.
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. For those in attendance, copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and Planning Department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representatives to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please share your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the room. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. All speakers at the podium, please remove your face mask before speaking into the microphone. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking, but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please provide your contact information to the Planning Department. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on all the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as courteous and concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available from the planning staff. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to the District Court.
Thank you. Next item, we're going to have roll call.
Yes, sir. Bill Johnson.
Yes.
Fox.
Here.
McKay.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Duell.
Here.
Blick.
Here.
Nix.
Here.
Foster is absent. Warren is absent. Joe Johnson.
Here.
Miles.
Here.
Hartman.
Here.
Cunningham.
Here.
Williams Bay.
Here.
Mr. Chair, I show 12 members present.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go through the agenda and see how many of these items we can take on consent. The first one has to do with subdivision item 2021-00030. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Oh, I suppose I should. Let's approve the minutes. I show that Mr. Nix and Mr. Blick was not here at that meeting.
Move for approval.
Second.
Second.
Got a motion approved by Mr. McKay, second by Mr. Green. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, now we're going to go to subdivision 2021-00030. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual want to hear it? Is there anybody?
Nope.
I'm sorry?
No.
Okay. Is there anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Is there anybody virtual want to hear this case? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move for approval.
Second.
Got a motion to approve by Mr. Hartman, second by Ms. Miles. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, now the public hearing items, which item 4.1, we're going to hear that case because it was deferred from the 8/14 meeting. The next one, conditional 2022-00028, and we're going to hear that case also. The next one's condition 2022-00029. Is there anybody on the commission want to hear this case? Anybody virtual, anybody virtual commissioners want to hear this case? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Seeing none, is there anybody virtual want to hear this case? 2022-00029. Hearing none, we'll take that on consent. The next one's 2022-00033. Anybody on the commission want to hear this case?
I'd like to hear that case.
What was that?
I'd like to hear it.
Okay, we'll hear that case. Next one's 2022-00034. Anybody on the commission want to hear that case? How about the commissioners that are virtual want to hear that case? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear that case? Is there anybody want to hear this, that's virtual to hear this case? 2022-00034.
Larry Patel.
What was that now? Did you want to hear this case?
Larry Patel's office would like to hear the case.
Okay.
2022-00034.
Okay, we'll hear this case. Next one's the PUD 2022-00016. Any of the commissioners want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual want to hear this case? Is there anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Yes. We will hear this case. Next one's 4.7, zoning case 2022-00037. Any commissioners want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual? Do you guys want to hear it? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Is there anybody virtual want to hear this case? That's 2022-00037. Hearing none, we'll take that on consent. Next one's 4.8, zoning case 2022-00038. Any commissioners want to hear this case? How about the commissioners that are virtual? Anybody in the commission chambers want to hear this case? Yes? We'll hear that case.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve items, 4.3 and 4.7.
Second.
Got a motion to approve by Mr. Green. Was that second by Joe?
Yes.
Second by Joe Johnson. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? That carries. 12-0. All right, now we're gonna go back to item 4.1, zoning case 2022-00035. And this is a case that was deferred.
Good afternoon, Erin Buckfin with the Planning Department. That is correct. Item 4.1 is in regard to Zone 2022-00035, which was heard at the meeting on the 4th and was deferred to this meeting. This was a request for a zone change from B multifamily to LC limited commercial for a property on the west side of Northwest Street and within 1/4 mile of West Sioux Boulevard. And as a reminder, so this subject site is developed with a single-story, two-family dwelling that is currently being utilized as office space. The applicant intends to sell this property and is looking to rezone it and bring it into compliance before doing so, as the office is not a permitted use in its current zoning district. At the last meeting, the MAPC expressed a desire to consider the requested LC zoning with a protective overlay, and staff has worked with the agent to determine which uses permitted in the LC limited commercial district would be appropriate for this site and in context with the area. Additionally, staff has recommended development standards for the protective overlay to minimize the potential impact of these commercial uses on the abutting residential properties. Approval of the requested LC limited commercial zoning with protective overlay number 395 would limit permitted uses to those of a lesser intensity, ensuring the site remains consistent with the surrounding area. LC limited commercial uses permitted by the protective overlay number 395 are construction, sales and service, convenience stores, restaurants, general retail, secondhand stores, agricultural research, and agricultural sales and service. In addition to the outline uses, the protective overlay contains standards for site development with provisions to mitigate impacts on the adjacent residential properties. These include a requirement for screening of the site where it abuts the residential properties to the west and north, as well as limits for the use of outdoor speakers and permitted signs. Additionally, there was a provision added to require any structure that would replace the current structure to be constructed in a residential style and be no more than 35 foot in height to better fit in with the residential character of the neighborhood. With the protective overlay 395, staff finds the request for limited commercial zoning to be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Largely, the limit to the use would ensure that the commercial uses would be neighborhood serving and consistent with the scope of what is suggested by the comprehensive plan. The subject site is located within the established central area and within the half-mile buffer zone of the neighborhood hub, located at West 13th Street North and Northwest Street. This plan calls for a nodal development plan pattern that creates a critical mass at the node center and then expands outward with decreasing intensity in use. This change would be buffered, so the LC zoning on this site would be buffered from the adjacent residential properties by the GEO properties you can see there in green surrounding, and the protective overlay would require that screening surround the property on those two sides as well, as long as those properties remained residential. We have spoken with the applicant again about the protective overlay. This list was put together through a collaborative effort with them, and I believe that they are amenable to all of the provisions of what is stated here in the PO. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about,
Any questions,
Case.
Mr. Green?
Yeah, the screening that's required, is that typical to have screening between LC and GO?
so my understanding is that it is typical to have screening between LC and residential zoning. And although those properties are GO because they are developed the residential property, that was the intent of putting that screening in.
I was just kind of curious that we would be, I understand it's being used as residential, but it's zoned GO, so I didn't know if that was typical for us to require.
That I'm not sure if
Fencing.
but I do know that the LC it is typical.
When we looked at this, and Paul, if you want to go to the aerial, especially with the property to the west, you're correct, Mr. Green, the zoning code would not normally require screening between LC and GO. What we were looking to do, since it is a residential use and really the existing parking lot of the subject properties on the west side of the structure, if it is zoned commercially, the level of intensity of the use would increase. And the concern was to mitigate possible negative impacts of like glare of headlights going in, crossing the boundary into a residential use. Again, it is GO and would not normally require it, but we were looking at mitigating possible impacts on how the properties are used. If the property to the west is ever redeveloped, screening would not normally be required. You could amend the protective overlay to say the screening is only required as long as the properties are used residentially. If you wanted to put a stipulation to put like a sunset on it if it's ever changed. But that was the basis of our reasoning, was based on how the properties were used versus what the zoning code would actually require.
I know the intent for this property is to be LC. And I think that there's currently it's partially residential. I mean, is there residents there now? Is somebody living?
On the subject site,
Yeah, on the subject side.
my understanding is it's entirely used as an office space.
It is all office now. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Thank you. Applicant or agent, please. You have 10 minutes.
Yes, I believe this is Ben Gartner. I am the agent for the owner.
Give us your address.
My address is 150 North Market, Wichita.
Go ahead.
I believe there's a bit of a miscommunication regarding the screening. Based on my previous email communication, the understanding that we had was that there were four excluded uses: farmers market in the city and county, nursery and garden center, service station, and limited vehicle repair. Those four would require the screening if we wanted them to be included in the protective overlay. The response that we gave was that we did not want them included so that we did not have to have the screening. And that was the understanding that we had going into this, was that we would not be required to screen because we were not including those four in the permitted uses.
Anything else?
No, other than that, I think we're on the same page.
Thank you. Any questions of the agent?
I don't have one for the agent, but I've got another one for staff. If this property had maintained we had gone GO with this, like staff recommended a couple of weeks ago, would the screening be required?
No.
Because the parking lot is still there and.
That is correct. No, there would not have been screening required.
Okay.
Now, that's what he said. Was that part of the deal when you guys met with him?
We did look at that and we did discuss it and determine that screening would likely be beneficial in general, just based on the level of intensity that commercial uses would bring with the parking lot on the west side.
So you're saying you're still going to require the screening?
Yes, that is the way the protective overlay is written right now.
Okay, any other questions of staff or anyone? Is there anyone else in the commission or chambers who want to speak on this item? Is there anybody more virtual that wants to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'm willing to make a motion, and that would be to approve the zoning request, but to withhold the requirement for the screening on the west and north property lines. Yeah, take that piece of it out of the protective overlay. And the reason behind that, I think I've kind of alluded. If this had been zone GO, the parking lot would still be in existence, and there would have been no requirement for the screening. Also, the types of uses that this property is going to be seeing, I don't feel like the fence would be required.
Got a motion by Mr. Green, second by Mr. McKay to approve it with the exception of eliminating the screen wall. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Nay.
Is there 2 nays?
Probably roll call.
I believe so, sir. We can do a roll call if you like.
Please.
Okay, just to repeat the motion is to approve per the staff recommendation, except for striking item 3 on the protective overlay, which is the requirement for the screening. So, Bill Johnson,
Yes.
Fox,
Yes.
McKay,
Yes.
Green,
Aye.
Dool,
Yes.
Blick. Aye. That's yes, or aye, sorry. Nix,
Yes.
Deborah Foster is absent. Warren is absent. Joe Johnson,
Yes.
Miles,
No.
Hartman,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Ms. Cunningham?
Ms. Cunningham,
No. You hear me?
Now I
Yes,
can.
we heard you, correct. Williams Bay.
No.
Sir, I show, out of 12, I show 9 in favor and 3 opposed.
Okay, the next item, 4.2, conditional use 2022-00028. Which is a case very close to the one we just heard.
Hello again. Item 4.2 is conditional use 2022-00028, a conditional use request for vehicle and equipment sales outdoor. The applicant is requesting the approval of the conditional use on an outdoor, for outdoor sales on a property generally located on the southeast corner of Northwest Street and West Zoo Boulevard. The subject site is zoned LC Limited Commercial and is developed currently with a vehicle repair shop. Vehicle sales are permitted as a conditional use in the LC Limited Commercial zoning, subject to the supplementary use regulations outlined in the Unified Zoning Code. If this request for conditional use is approved, the owner intends to add the outdoor sales to the existing use as the repair shop. The subject property is a triangle-shaped lot with frontage both on West Zoo Boulevard and Northwest Street's east side. Development south of the intersection of West Zoo Boulevard and Northwest Street follows a strip corridor pattern and commercial uses and zoning generally are situated along Northwest Street, abutting residential neighborhoods to the east and west sides of the arterial. You can see on the zoning map that properties to the north are zoned TF3, two-family residential, and those are developed with two-family residences. To the south, properties are zoned limited commercial, and the abutting property is developed with a retail store. To the east, property is zoned TF3, and again is zoned with two-family residences. And then to the west, properties are zoned B and GO and are developed with single-family and two-family residences. If we could go to the site plan, please. I do want to point out that there was previously a request for this same use on the property. In 2001, a request for conditional use for outdoor vehicle sales was submitted to the MAPC, and both MAPC and the City Council denied this request. The site plan here is a revised version of the site plan that was proposed at that time. And the major change being that you can see where it's handwritten there, that once was a canopy, it is now developed with a garage of the same footprint. The otherwise significant changes to the site have not occurred. The proposed site plan shows 10 display stalls for outdoor vehicle sales located on the north corner of the lot along West Sioux Boulevard and Northwest Street. And then there is an additional space noted here that is on a display ramp. However, I do want to note that should this be approved, supplementary use regulations for outdoor vehicle sales in this district prohibit elevated platforms. The site plan indicates that there are currently 7 off-street parking stalls that serve the existing use as a tire repair shop. For the conditional use, the off-street parking schedule would require 8 stalls, an additional 5 stalls, totaling 13 stalls. And should the request be approved, a shared parking plan could be created. Additionally, I do want to note that should this request be approved, staff would recommend that the number of vehicles for sale be limited to 5, despite there being 10 on the plan there. A survey of the surrounding area did show that there are 2 car lots operating nearby. Each have been approved as a conditional use. One is 0.45 miles south of the subject site on the northeast corner of Elm and Northwest Street. That was improved in 2015. Additionally, there is a new and used auto dealer located just under a mile away from the subject site at 400 Northwest Street. This was approved in 1991 as a request for use exception by the BZA. And this also is, the same lot was expanded in 2002. In 2020, a property located at 4231 West Central Avenue, so 0.8 miles south of the subject site, did also receive a conditional use. However, the site has not been developed as a car lot, so they received that but never followed through with the development. I think I'll have us go to the photos if that's all right. Okay, so you'll see this is the subject site facing north. Next photo, please. And then this is just southwest of the subject site, but facing the intersection. Next photo, please. This is across the street, so just west of the subject site. South of the subject site, you'll see that there is, this is the portion of that kind of limited commercial strip that goes down south of West Street, or down the strip of West Street. And then aerial. The requested conditional use is found not to be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The 2035 Wichita Future Growth Concept Map identifies the area as appropriate for commercial land uses. However, commercial land uses are not provided a specific definition and should reflect the full diversity of commercial development intensities and types. And so then, rather than designating the specific intensities for each commercial area, the plan suggests that existing development and neighborhood context should serve as a guide for what is appropriate in each unique location. Commercial development in the subject area is generally lower intensity in neighborhood serving, and outdoor vehicle sales are a higher intensity use, and the approval of this request would be out of context with the neighborhood and inconsistent with the development goals of the plan. The subject site is located within the established central area. Development in this area should again be appropriate for its context, and typically in this area, lower intensity commercial uses are buffered from the abutting residential properties by offices and other neighborhood serving uses, and outdoor vehicle sales at this location would not fit with the existing development pattern. Should the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission determine that this application be approved, staff recommends that it shall be subject to the following conditions, and the commission would be required to adopt additional findings to support these recommendations. I do want to note that I have spoken with the applicant, and the applicant has indicated that should this be approved, they would be amenable to the conditions that are outlined here. If the Planning Commission would decide to adopt alternate findings from staff findings. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, staff?
I wonder, is there any connection between this one and the previous application? I know they're different applicants, but they appear to be across the street from each other.
Yes, that is correct. They are unrelated. However, that has brought up a little bit of confusion just with folks seeing the signs right across the street from each other and thinking that maybe they are related. However, they are not.
Any other questions, staff? Okay, thank you. Applicant or agent? Please come forward. You got 10 minutes. Uh-oh. Applicant or agent?
Hello.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Julio Garcia, and my case number is CON 2022000028. And I agree. Excuse me.
Give us your address, please.
Okay, 1108 Northwest Street, Wichita, Kansas 67203.
Go ahead then.
And I agree to the consideration recommended by the staff report, and will be 100% in compliance to you for the consideration. Thank you very much.
Any questions to the applicant? Thank you.
So is he agreeing to just 5 cars?
Yes, I do. I sell cars, and I got the store for probably like 13 years. And I do auto, I do the auto repair and new and used tires. And now I had to do is the auto sales too.
Mr. Blick, you got?
Mr. Garcia, I noticed on your property, on your site map, on the very top of that property where it points to the north side, there's some grass that's there. You're not going to be parking any cars on that grass, are you?
No, sir.
Okay.
No.
And then the second question is, you agreed just now to 5 cars. I was actually looking at your site map where you have 7 spots on that west side, And I don't see a problem with having 7 spots on that west side along there. But if you were gonna do just 5, would you just do those on that west side, or would you do that on the east side of that northeast side?
Yeah, I can put as 5 and 5, or I can put or use 5. It's fine.
Do you want them on the west side or east?
Oh, and on the west side, I'm sorry. Yes, 5 on the west side, it's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else in the commission chambers want to speak on this item? Is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Hearing none, I'll bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
I would actually like to make a motion to approve allowing him to have 7 cars on the lot.
I'll second that. The reason why I'm seconding that motion is, the way I look at this, it's a auto repair shop to begin with. And they're probably going to he probably has vehicles sitting out waiting to be repaired, waiting their turn to go in for repair. And I guess I really don't see a difference between a car sitting for repair or a car with a for sale sign on it. Cars are going to be there. So that's my thought on the second.
And I agree with that. I can't, I'm almost would have gone towards the 10, but I am considering how many cars he does potentially have on the lot that are waiting to be repaired. I don't want to, go over what he actually is able to accommodate, but I think 7 would certainly be a reasonable number.
Okay, there's a motion by Ms. Miles, second by Mr. Green for staff comments with the exception of 7 cars instead of 5. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, Secretary.
So just a quick clarification, and I just want to make sure I've captured that correctly because of the findings that need to be made. What I'm hearing is that one of the findings is that the property is already in use for car repair, and there are cars that are already stored on the site. So therefore, by approving the conditional use for auto sales to take place, there's a sentiment that there would not be an adverse impact to the surrounding area because that is already an automobile-focused use that's already there.
You stated that well.
Yes.
Better than I did.
Any other discussion? Ms. Cunningham, did you have something?
No, I'm in favor, so.
Say, bring it back to commission. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Is there anybody opposed? That carries unanimously. Our next item, 4.4, CUP 2022, 00033.
Good afternoon, everyone. Christina Reith, Associate Planner. This is case number CUP 2022-33. The applicant is Sloss & Companies with Butch Nuss, and the agent is PEC Engineering and Matt Williams. They are requesting a minor amendment to CUP DP 168. The property is currently zoned LC Limited Commercial, and the property is 2.97 acres in size, and they are proposing to allow for the development of a senior living cooperative on the generally located on the northeast corner of East 21st Street North and North Webb Road, and staff is recommending approval with conditions. So just a little bit of a background on CUP DP 168 in general. It's currently developed with a bank, 3 restaurants, a self-storage facility, a medical office, and an insurance office. And the proposed uses on parcel 4G, which is the property in question here, the current uses within the CUP are neighborhood shopping center, theaters, grocery stores, department stores, discount stores, health clubs, and fitness centers, and they're looking to add a senior multifamily building onto that. The applicant has not submitted a site plan or elevations for this subject property, but according to the agent, the proposed senior living cooperative will be 3 stories high and will be developed with, it says here on the report, an unspecified number of 2-bedroom apartments. I later spoke with the agent, and they're proposing about 55 apartments, 2-bedroom apartments on this parcel. So, and they're also looking to modify the CUP in that the maximum gross floor area goes from 70,000 to 122,000 square feet. The floor area ratio would go from 0.5 to 1.04. The maximum building height would go from 35 to 45 feet. And instead of 4 buildings, they're proposing just 1 building on that parcel. And the parking, for the 2-bedroom units, they'll be required to have 1.5 parking stalls per unit, which is less than the Unified Zoning Code's parking requirement of 1.75 stalls per 2-bedroom unit. And just one thing that we noted is that because the proposed senior living cooperative is about 45 feet tall and it's located within an airport hazard zone, buildings in that area generally cannot be taller than 25 feet. So the applicant will have to apply for a Federal Aviation Administration or an FAA permit prior to receiving a building permit. The proposed application is in conformance with the Community Investments Plan. The proposed 3-story building with 2-bedroom apartments will bring higher density housing to the area, and the Community Investment Plan states that higher density housing is appropriate when mixed with these commercial uses. So based on the information available at the time the report was prepared, staff is recommending approval to the amendment, subject to the following conditions. One is that they'll obtain that permit from the FAA, and that the amendment will only apply to parcel 4G. All other requirements of the CUP shall remain in effect unless or until a separate zoning action is filed, and the applicant shall submit 4 revised copies of the CUP within 60 days after approval of the case. I did receive 1 comment via email, which I passed out to you guys, which I will summarize for those who can't read the email. I did receive 1 concerned email. They were concerned about drainage, the amount of space between the building and the adjacent residential zoning is going to be about 40 feet. And then they're concerned about the reduction of property values and the increase in traffic. I will now stand for questions.
Any questions of staff? Thank you. Oh,
Just one. And this may be for the applicant or their agent. I just want to make sure that if they're going to have 55 apartments, I didn't do the math, but that'd be, what, 75, 80 plus parking spaces needed? And I just wanted to make sure that there'd be ample.
Yeah, I would double check with the applicant.
Yeah, for the applicant.
Yeah,
I'll get him ready to respond.
yeah.
It would be 83 spaces, 82 or 83 spaces.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Were there any other comments from the neighbors other than the one you just talked about?
Not that were received by the planning department.
Was a sign posted for this? I walked that area.
I did not see if a sign was posted.
Anything else? Thank you. Applicant or agent?
Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. Good to see you. Matt Williams with PEC at 303 South Topeka. I did want to say the sign was posted out there. Possible that it might have fallen down, but it was posted. I want to introduce Shane with Real Estate Equities Development, who's going to go into a little bit more detail about the project.
Thank you. Commission, thanks for your time today. My name's Shane Wright. I'm a principal with Real Estate Equities, one of the owners with Real Estate Equities. We're the development company developing this proposed project and others. Address 1303 Corporate Center Drive, Suite 400, Eagan, Minnesota, 55121. Would somebody mind pulling up the presentation? And then do I have the ability to click through, or you all do? Okay. We'll kind of go pretty quickly because I know I've got 10 minutes, so we'll jump in. Our company's Real Estate Equities Development. We're proposing this village cooperative. It's a 100% owner-occupied senior community. So it'll be fully owned by the residents. Next slide. We'll do a quick introduction into our company and then what a cooperative is and then the site plan specifics. And I've got a few things I'll point out, address some of the parking questions that came about. Next slide. We're a Twin City-based company, been in business since 1972. Next slide. We have about 100 developments we've done since that time, probably closer to 12,000 homes at this point. We started doing cooperatives, next slide. We started doing senior cooperatives about 20 years ago. We have 40 village cooperative communities. Actually, we have some new ones, so we're probably in the range of 41, 42 now in 10 different states. We've actually completed now, this needs to be updated, we've completed over 500 million in cooperatives. We're one of 3 developers in the country that specifically does senior housing cooperatives. Next slide, please. Here's the 10 states that we're located in. We're probably a little closer to 5,000 owners in these states. That all the green pins you see there are completed communities that are 100% owned by the residents. Every completed community is full with a lengthy wait list. The red ones you see are either proposed projects or under construction. Next slide, please. We have 5 currently in Kansas: Lawrence, Lenexa, Olathe, Shawnee, and we have one under construction in Overland Park as well. So this would be our 6th community in the state of Kansas if we are approved. Next slide, please. Just quick background. Most of you probably do not know this, so I put this on here. Senior cooperative model was really invented in Minnesota in the 70s. There's about 130 in the country, 80 are in Minnesota. It's a unique form of home ownership for seniors. In Minnesota, pretty much every street runs into a lake, a golf course, or a senior housing cooperative. It's just pretty much known in Minnesota. I grew up in Kansas City. When I started this company, they were just beginning their cooperative development, so that was about 20 years ago. And I question everything why we stayed in Minnesota. It's a beautiful model of home ownership for seniors. So we started in Minnesota, and then we slowly went into Iowa, and then Kansas City, and Colorado, and beyond. And I can't imagine a better option for retirees, and I'll answer any questions you have on this. I've pretty much spent my entire career in senior cooperatives. But the beauty of these is we keep them to a small number of homes on purpose because retirees want a community around them. They want a family. They don't want a huge project. They want to know everybody. They want security. They want to own it at a really good value. They take a lot of pride in the ownership. And it's just really exploded in Minnesota all these years, and we can't do these fast enough. And to be honest with you, when I came to Wichita, I used to come here as a kid a bunch. But when I toured it for the first time from a business standpoint, you all have the least amount of senior housing of any city I've been around in the country. And that might surprise you, but I study thousands of cities for a living. I've never seen a city even close to this size that has as less as you do for retirees, and especially the target market that we look at. So the first thing I looked at was, why is that? And we dug deeper and deeper into that. And we think this is a beautiful location and city for this. And I predict you guys are going to get a lot more proposals for senior housing in the future based on the numbers. Yes?
How are you going to handle the parking?
So the parking goes beneath the building. So we have below grade parking. So that's one of the popular features of the co-op is the parking's beneath the building. So at least 1-to-1, there's more than one for every home in the garage, and then we have a little bit on the surface. That's one of the reasons for the request on the amendment to the CUP is the majority of that increase in square footage is actually below the ground because it technically counts in the square footage calcs. Next slide, please. We'll kind of jump through some of these so we can get to questions and kind of the site planning. But basically, a cooperative corporation, we sell 1 share for every home in the building. We're only proposing 55 homes. The cooperative owns everything. The residents are the shareholders in the corporation. We essentially set it up where they're their own landlord, but we professionally manage it and serve their board long term. Because they're their own landlord, they save a lot of money long term. And so we guide them through the ownership of this, and we answer their questions, and we manage our community, so we help them with all the best practices that goes into the cooperative operations. Next slide, please. We can skip through some of this, but really cooperative means ownership. It means shared operation value. That's really kind of the fundamental DNA of a co-op. And our retirees are younger. They're generally been in a house for a long time. The longevity of residents in their houses in Wichita it's staggering how long people have been in their homes. The only time I've seen cities with longer length of time in a home was Iowa, rural towns in Iowa. And it's staggering. And it's because there aren't the options that people would look to leave their home for. So next slide, please. People love these because they're new construction as well. And we'll get into some of the operations here in a minute. Next slide. Again, we talked about 55 homes is all that we're looking at. It's a very small number of homes. When we get to the site plan, you'll see we could do way more than 55 homes on the site. We're not going to. We keep these on small on purpose. They generally take about 16 to 18 months to build. We haven't started projecting a start date because we think that's a little bit of the cart before the horse. This meeting, it would come as a part of that before we would start projecting start dates for that. But they're very nice buildings, architectural details. When you build as many as we have, that's imperative to owners who are going to be living there. The homes will be built over a post-tension concrete deck with 57 underground parking stalls, and then we will meet that 83 parking stall requirement that was mentioned earlier. Next slide. There's a lot of community areas. This is based around a community, so there's a lot of community areas in the building for the residents. So this just gives kind of a summary of all those amenities and community areas. We offer a wide variety in the number of homes. They average 1,341 square feet. So it's basically mathematically about where people spend 90 to 95% of the time in their home right now. We don't ask them to downsize too much because the people who move into our communities, they're not looking to downsize that much. Next slide, please. So from a concept site plan, obviously, again, approval from the commission and the city is paramount, number one. Number two is approval from the seller of the property on elevations and ultimately the materials in the building. But we wanted to show a depiction of how this building is scaled on the site. You can see the brown where the building is, the gray where the parking area is, and then we wanted everybody to see the amount of green area there. Because we put the parking beneath the building, we're able to landscape significantly more. The parking the parking beneath is probably 35,000 square feet, so that's part of that request on amendment to the CUP. If you took 35,000 square foot and you put it on the property, you'd have less green space. So we're able to add significant amounts of green space because of that. To the north of the building is where we potentially identify an area for raised garden beds. That's not set in stone at this state, but 1 minute. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Next slide. So just a couple of renderings if you'll click through. And if you go to the very end for me, please. Yep, just click through pictures. You can see so why does a cooperative make a great neighbor? We're in neighborhoods. Probably 80% of our projects are in a neighborhood. We make a great neighbor because this is a soft, quiet use with senior owner residents. We create the least amount of traffic of any residential use possible. During AM peak times, International Traffic Engineer Study would tell you we create about 9 trips at AM peak time on 55 homes. The owners are local residents. It's 100% owned by them. They take a lot of pride in that. We have reserve programs set up through the operations for capital improvements. We've never had an assessment on a co-op. Not one single co-op has ever had an assessment because they set up reserve programs long-term. The longevity of the residents, their turnover of the homes is minimal.
Sir, do you need some additional time?
What's that?
Do you need some additional time?
If you'll grant me additional time, I probably just need 2-3 more minutes, is it?
I can grant 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, sir. The longevity of the residents and the turnover of homes is minimal. The average time they're staying there is probably in the range of 8 to 12 years, which is significantly longer than traditional senior housing. The owners there are often volunteers in the community. Volunteering is a huge component of their lifestyle amongst our residents. The buildings professionally managed. They're beautiful buildings and homes, and the underground parking creates way more green space on our properties. At the end of the day, we know that ownership is desirable amongst retirees. We could never meet the demand of this. The people who get into our communities really feel like they've gotten lucky to get this location. So in closing, what I would say is we hosted a neighborhood meeting a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't a requirement. We did it because we actually asked for their support. We asked for their support because I know long-term, I've been doing this 20 years. We know we're the best possible neighbor. And we asked for support. And in that room, were there some people that didn't want us, and were there some people that thought about it and thought about the alternatives that could go there? I had some people come up to me and say, I'm really close, I'm next door to the site. I would rather this than the alternatives. Had somebody else say, we don't want you there. But what was important to us is we want to be a great neighbor, and we know we will be, and we're asking for your support. And if you have any questions, I've poured my entire career into this, and this is desperately needed in Wichita. Not just 55 homes. We're just proposing 55 homes and a small community on this corner, and we know we're going to make a great neighbor, and I'd love to explain even further if you have additional questions. Thank you for your time today.
Any questions, the speaker? Hearing none, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Is there anybody else here in the commission chambers want to speak on this item? Anybody in the commission okay. Please come forward and give us your name and address.
My name is Brian Stewart, 11413 East Brookview Court, Wichita, 67226. I wasn't actually here for this one, but I wanted to chime in because there was an issue about the signs, and one of the things I just wanted to share is that those signs are small, they're placed in locations that you may not normally drive by, and the sign for my particular thing that I came here before, I only saw a couple days ago. And it doesn't leave time to plan and prepare and take time off work and talk to your neighbors and all those other things that you want to do when you come before the Planning Commission. That signage needs to be out earlier, it needs to be bigger, and it needs to cover a larger area. And that's why you don't get good turnout and good feedback at these meetings. And the reason why you'll probably hear some at the later one is because I canvassed, 50 homes in the last 2 nights to make people aware to come to one of these meetings today. So there needs to be better communication to the citizens of Wichita on these issues. And I love that idea, by the way. That concept sounds like a great concept. I don't live around it, but I like the idea of it.
Thank you. Any questions, speaker? Does anybody else in the commission chamber want to speak on this item? Anybody else? Is there anybody virtual want to hear this, speak on this item? Anybody virtual? Item 2022-00033. Hearing none, we'll bring it back to commission.
Got a quick question for staff. When these signs go up notifying the neighborhood of potential developments, zone changes, whatever, is it just a sign that goes up? Is that the only way that neighborhoods and areas surrounding these properties, is that the only way they are notified that there is something coming in their area that they need to be aware of?
No, neighbors within a certain radius are also notified. They get a letter in the mail.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you specify that radius? Because it doesn't cover a very large area. It's about 200 feet. That doesn't cover very many homes.
Hang on.
The radius for this would have been equal to that of the original notification area when the CUP was established, which would likely be at least 500 to maybe 750 feet around that parcel. Since it was only an amendment, it doesn't go from the boundaries of the entire CUP, but it's the original notification, which again, based on the acreage of this, of the entire CUP on the northeast corner, would likely be, I don't have that number in front of me, would likely be 750 feet at a minimum. And then you go outwards from that corner parcel to 750 feet in all directions.
Thank you.
Bring it back to board. What's the pleasure of the commission?
I make a motion to approve as written.
I'll second.
Got a motion
Another
to approve.
comment. Just a comment. I drove by the site and did not see a sign out there.
Got a motion to approve by Mr. Blick, second by Mr. Hartman. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Is there anybody opposed? Next item. CUP 2022-00034.
Paul, if you could go to the CUP drawing just before we begin. There you go. Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. Philip Zievenbergen with the planning staff for the record. CUP 2234 is an amendment to DP 12, which was the Town East Mall Community Unit Plan. The applicant is Simon Properties, who is the owner of the majority of the mall property. They are requesting an amendment for a couple reasons. Number one, as you can see on your screen here, I've outlined what it will become parcel 1B if this application is approved. This is the Dillard's department store and the surrounding parking that they own. This parcel is being created to exempt them from the proposed new uses on the remainder of parcel 1. And parcel 1 being the majority of the mall property, save for, as you can see in the middle, parcel 16 that was created when Shields came through, and that is now under construction to become Shields. But in general, the rest of the mall area plus the remaining parking, so that includes the parking up here, all of this parking around here to the east side as well. If you're familiar from our last planning commission, this area up here are parcels 13 and 14. They're not part of this. It just applies to parcel 1. In general, the applicant is requesting to add additional uses for outdoor retail, outdoor sales, outdoor events on parcel 1. In your staff report on page 2, this would be what will become item C under the proposed uses for parcel 1. In there, like I said, short-term outdoor retail sales, nurseries, farmers markets, vehicles display. So vehicle displays would be car shows, boat shows, RV shows, not vehicle sales. It would just be display. Personal improvement services, so that's nail, hair, barbershop, things like that. Outdoor community events and ancillary associated food and beverage sales. So that'd be food and beverage sales related to an event going on. They have provided a number of conditions for these types of uses. The display of vehicles, again, not the sale of them, the display of vehicles would be limited to motorized vehicles, boats, RVs, farm equipment, motorcycles, including car shows. They would allow a temporary outdoor tire check and repair and dent removal services. So pretty much anything fairly non-mechanical. When you think of such as hail damage, they can do fairly non-mechanical ways to remove hail damage. Seasonal nurseries and farmers markets. Limited outdoor events and shows, including associated food and beverage sales, merchandise sales related to the event or show. So if you have a little bit of a concert going on, they can have a merch table. Outdoor recreation and personal improvement activities like yoga classes, cycling classes, hobby instruction, and other similar events. The one thing I really want to hone in on is item F under here, and they're specifically prohibiting circuses or carnivals. So we're not bringing in carnival rides or having things like that as you've seen in some other larger parking lots on occasion throughout Wichita where carnivals are allowed. So they're specifically prohibiting that. They don't want those type of uses. All the equipment have to meet the building setback requirements. Any portable restrooms would be provided. If there's any permitting or special permissions that they need from MAPC, they'd be running them by the Building and Construction Department for the placement of those additional restrooms. I also want to hone in on item I, which is that all of these additional uses taking place outdoors of the mall, number one, are limited to the hours of operation at 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. So they want to still be a good neighbor. So even if there's a show or there's music involved related to an event going on, you're ending at 8 p.m. Sunday through Saturday, only beginning at 10 a.m. So they're not necessarily looking at things to drone on into the night and become nuisance for neighbors. In addition, they're limiting the duration of any type of use to 14 consecutive days. So if you have a car show, it's not going to last more than 2 weeks. The one caveat that of the number of consecutive days is a seasonal nursery. So if like Stutzman's or some other type of nursery wants to set up shop in a parking lot like we often see in a lot of large shopping centers around Wichita. They don't have to tear down after 2 weeks, knowing they often sell different types of plants throughout the growing season, depending on what's applicable to be planted. The only modification to the recommended language was really just kind of clean up language that staff identified. Some of that is related to the farmer's market, adding language regarding adherence to supplemental use regulations found in D36JJ. And in talking with the applicant, that they said that they were amenable to those supplemental use regulations, and at this time, we're not necessarily wanting to request any waivers of the supplemental use regulations. In addition, farmers markets have to be licensed by the city of Wichita. There's a specific chapter of the city code that governs outdoors farmers markets. So we wanted to add that language in there just to make sure there was no question about enforcement regarding the required licenses and things like that that govern farmers markets. In addition, when it comes to signs and access, particularly for parcel 1B with it being created, cleaning up language to things that actually were pertaining to 1B and then cleaning up what would be the remainder of parcel 1. The example that I have regarding signage, parcel 1 talks about how there would be allowed a 55-foot sign on the maximum sign permitted on the south side of parcel 1. Well, if you use the same language applied to parcel 1B as it was submitted by the applicant, that would allow them a 55-foot sign on the south side of parcel 1B. So again, cleaning up language so that signs are applicable to really truly parcel 1B, that there's not any type of confusion or issues in terms of enforcement of what's allowed and what's not allowed. And again, the access points, we're just cleaning up of when parcel 1B is created. Parcel 1 only has access off of Douglas in one location, and parcel B has the other access off of Douglas. So again, not necessarily in conflict with the applicant, but just cleaning up the language so that governing of the CUP does not get convoluted or questionable. Staff is recommending approval subject to the standard conditions that we often apply to CUP amendments, that this applies to only parcels 1 and 1B. All the other CUP regulations remain in effect, and that we need the required number of copies if this is approved. Staff has heard some phone calls from surrounding neighbors. With this being the majority of the mall property, you have a 1,000-foot radius around parcel 1 going in all directions, so there's quite a bit of a notification area. I did have conversations with the HOA liaison for the Rockwood HOA, which is north of Douglas. I gave them our staff report last week after it was published. Their only one concern was when they brought it to an HOA meeting. She got back with me yesterday and said their only concern that they really came through was whether or not it was going to generate additional trash that might blow into their neighborhood. And reaching out to the applicant, they stated that additional trash facilities would be around. It's the responsibility of the property owner to pick up that trash. Overall, it was communicated that through this, the mall wants to continue to be a good neighbor to the residences around, and it's part of their reputation is at stake of making sure that they don't become a nuisance to neighbors when it comes to picking up of trash at events and things like that. I have heard from neighbors on the east side of Douglas from the Bonnie Bray area with concerns of just activating the parking lot and what type of noise or things that might be produced by that. Again, a lot of that is governed by the hours of operation being from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. In addition to that, the Wichita has a noise ordinance, even during those hours, that limit decibel levels. And when you think about the amount of noise that's going to be generated from the parking lot of Town East getting across the Kellogg and Rock intersection at any time of day would probably be considerably hard to do in terms of being at a nuisance level. So there is governing language either in the community unit plan or in the city code regarding the provisions and mitigating possible things of nuisance level. Again, I think it speaks highly of the mall that they came in from the get-go. It wasn't even a negotiated thing. They submitted the application with the hours of operation ending at 8 p.m., not wanting to, if they do put on a concert, not wanting to have it go till midnight and have that questionable thing of whether or not they're going to be having issues with the neighbors. So this will be going to the District Advisory Board in September. We don't have any input from them. Otherwise, I can stand for any questions.
Any questions, staff?
How does the I guess, is it fenced? Is the parking lot going to change in configuration? Access is only at one point on Douglas, or will they be able to go out to Rock Road and to the east there, or to the west? How's, you see the line there, is that zone marked somehow, or?
No, that is a line on a map that indicates ownership. And so
Right.
the mall is not putting up fences to stop traffic from driving through the mall. What it means is in the parking lot associated with Dillard's, they're not going to have any of the events in that portion of the parking lot.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that cars can't drive along the driveway to get out of the mall at that location. They're not prohibited from using alternate exits and entrances around the mall parking lot. It's just when an event is set up shop, you're not going to have a car show in that part of the parking lot. You're not going to have, the staging area for a community event. Dillard's wants their parking lot for their customers only and not to be used for one of these events or types of outdoor use that the mall wants to do elsewhere in the parking lot.
Okay,
So no, that's not going to be fenced around. That was just a bold line to delineate where the parcel boundary will be. It's an imaginary line when you get actually in the real world.
That's what I assumed, but when you made the comment about how the parking, that access to Douglas was going to, that parcel one was going to have access to Douglas with that west drive, and this was going to have access to Douglas with the drive just, north of that site, caused me a little concern about access.
Yeah. Well, I apologize if that was confusing. Really, it was more of saying parcel one, technically, this is their access point off of Douglas, and parcel 1B has this access point, but community unit plans have cross-lot access agreements that they have to be in place.
Okay.
It was just cleaning up the language so that the community unit plan is correct in where the access points are, not prohibiting people from using the access points.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none or hearing none, applicant or agent?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hello? My name is Dolores Zeigert.
Whoa,
I
whoa,
live in
whoa.
Rockwood.
Wait,
My back,
you're gonna have to wait till the applicant speaks. I thought the commissioner wanted to speak. Please wait till we ask you to talk. Go ahead.
Afternoon, Phil Meyer with Boffman Company, agent for the applicant. With us here today virtually is Scott Richardson with Simon Properties. If you have specific questions for the applicant, Scott will be glad to answer those for you. I think Philip did a very thorough job of what we're trying to do here, and creating one more opportunity at Town East to help serve the Wichita community with the short-term outdoor sales events, recreation and entertainment events that Simon can put on occasionally. I asked Scott as we were doing this, how often does this happen? These happen once a month or what? Well, I'm going to tell you probably 10 to 15 times a year we'll have an event, on an average 12, but we don't know that. And every community they do this in, and they do this in a lot of their mall properties, it depends on the community and how much the community embraces the idea and how much it gets used. So, but we're guessing with the size of Wichita, we'll have on average 12 a year. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have, or I'll come back up after the lady asks her question from Rockwood.
Any questions, agent? Green? Thank you. Anybody else here in the commission chambers want to speak on this item? Anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Give us your name and address.
my name is Dolores Zeigert. I live at 7523 East Huntington. My backyard faces Douglas, right across the street from this proposed project. I have been at this address since 1998, and I have witnessed persistent trash along Douglas, and there's no directed effort to clean up the trash on a regular basis. Sometimes neighbors pick up the trash, but I worry about increasing trash with the traffic flow. I worry about the traffic on Douglas. I worry about the noise and people parking in our neighborhood. That's a big concern, especially since I live right across the street from it.
Anything else, ma'am?
Those are my concerns.
Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you. Any questions?
And also crime, increased crime in the neighborhood.
Okay. Anybody on the commission has a question of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else virtual who wants to speak on this item? Anybody else virtual? Hearing none, they just got rebuttal time.
So Philip did present to us the concern that the HOA had when they met about increased trash that could occur from these activities. Simon's response to that was that this will be, from a security standpoint and a maintenance standpoint, this will be policed just like the interior of the mall. So there will, if there's an event going outside, there's security around for that. And there will be Simon staff making sure that there are trash receptacles and the property is cleaned up after the use by whoever used it for that event. So they do plan on enforcing that and having that as part of the contracts with people. With that, I think, yeah, there will be security with the activity. And when I say that, if it's 2 or 3 day event, there may be some temporary fencing put up, but it'll come down when the event's over. It won't be up all the time. So with that, I'll answer any questions
Any
you may
questions
have.
of the agent?
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Fox?
This may be impossible, but if Simon Properties does this in other locations, I'm sure the purpose is to increase traffic to the mall and its shops as well as to the event. But are these things that like fill the parking lots to overflowing? Is it tend to just provide additional attractiveness for those who are coming to shop anyway?
Yeah, you'll notice nowadays that parking lot, even at Christmas time, that northwest lot's really not got much activity to it. So when we're in the height of Christmas season and weather here, but that's not when they want to do the outdoor events like this. And there's plenty of open space around the Simons where they can, around that mall, where they can do this and not have a negative impact on parking situation. I mean, the last thing they want to do is interfere with the daily operation of the mall. This is just to add additional opportunities, I'm going to say for our citizens, but for everybody, Simon's included.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? See none. Thanks, Phil. Bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to approve subject to staff comments. Second.
Motion by Mr. McKay, second by Mr. Green. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Next item, 4.6, PUD 2022-00016.
Good afternoon again, Philip Zevenbergen for the record. PUD 2216 is a zone change request in the county located at the northeast corner of North Greenwich and East 37th Street North. The property is currently zoned, as you can see, limited industrial. The property owner owns the entire quarter section that is in purple. This zone change is only applicable to the southwest quarter of that quarter section, the area in the black box on the screen. The purpose of the zone change request is to change it from limited industrial to planned unit development to allow for multifamily residential uses. The purpose of the multifamily is to create cluster home style for patio homes. Paul, if you could go to the PUD drawing, please. This best illustrates what they're looking at doing. You can see here, though this is going to be one entire lot, they're going to be constructing, or they're proposing to construct clusters of patio homes. So you're looking at zero entry type facilities. They are, during the time of platting, they will be platting an additional street right-of-way on the east side. Will be their access point in and out of the development, not off of Greenwich or 37th Street. The community that they look to develop will include a clubhouse, a pool, open space, and a dog park. Some of that will take place in Reserve A. However, Reserve A will also be their detention pond, which is kind of acts as a water amenity for visual purposes as well. Parcel 1, being the entire area except for the reserve, has a maximum height of 35 feet. So even if patio homes are not developed, you're not looking at 3 or 4 story apartment buildings. They're limited to 35 feet, which is the height restriction in single family and 2-family residential zoning. They have a maximum residential dwelling units of 225, which is a density ratio of 8.8 dwelling units per acre. MF18, which is the first multifamily residential zoning you can do, would allow 17.4. So they're actually looking at about almost half of the allowed density that MF18 would have allowed if they would just rezone it to a standard multifamily residential zoning classification. The maximum number of non-residential buildings is 3. That'd be the clubhouse, any type of maintenance buildings and things like that to support the development of this location. The reserve is limited to the use for stormwater, drainage, landscaping, drives, parking, utilities, and recreation. The setbacks for the property will have 25-foot setbacks along 37th and Greenwich, and then have 10-foot setbacks along the north and east property lines. Setbacks between the buildings within parcel 1 will be 10 feet, but ultimately governed by the fire code, the fire and building codes. I believe they did put the language in there that they would be 10 feet apart in there. Parking and traffic. Parking will be standard per the zoning code, so that's 1.75 spaces per 2-bedroom units or larger. Probably unlikely that they're going to be building 1-bedroom units. The majority of the parking will be taken care of with each individual unit. It's proposed that they would have a garage with a driveway. That would count for at least 2 spaces if it's a single car garage, because they have the space in the garage and the space in the driveway, which automatically makes sure that you're meeting your parking requirement. As you can see on the plan here, they are proposing some community spaces throughout the development for additional visitors or other people coming by to visit the area. Architectural controls will govern this site. Signage is per the sign code for MF18, which is 20-foot height limit and 48 square feet. Those would be permitted on Greenwich and 37th Street, in addition to the future right-of-way. So they're not asking for additional signage. They're not asking for taller signs. Standard signage language there. The PUD states that it will comply with the Wichita Landscape Ordinance. Though the property is in the county, they are looking to possibly annex in the future. And even though it's in the county, the PUD can still make it restrictive to the Wichita Landscape Ordinance. This would require landscape street yards along Greenwich and 37th Street. It would require landscape buffers. If the property to the east and north ever changes from limited industrial, it would require landscape buffers there. Right now, no landscaping is required along those 2 sides because it's industrial zoning. Screening would not be required on the north and the east. However, the applicant is written it into the language that they will be providing a screening wall or fence along those. Staff recommended language regarding screening would be adding a screening fence as an option on the south side since it's across the street from residential zoning. If this was a standard multifamily zoning designation, a screening fence would be required across the street from the single-family residential zoning to the south. This went to the Citizens Advisory Board for District 1 in the county last Monday. They considered the request. Overall, they did have a recommendation of approval with a unanimous vote. They did add language to the PUD regarding screening. And it's not to make it more restrictive. They actually wanted to provide an option to let the applicant obtain some of the screening standards by using landscaping instead. The way the PUD was submitted by the applicant would limit them to using a fence or a wall. The advisory board wanted to write it in to allow them to use landscaping so that they could use more natural vegetation to accomplish the screening and not just be pigeonholed and restricted to just using a fence or a wall. The applicant was amenable to that, and that was their recommendation. So that's something for you guys to consider this afternoon as you look to make a recommendation of potentially including that caveat of adding landscaping as an option for screening. You want to go to the zoning map. Properties to the north and east, as I said, are limited industrial. They are owned by the applicant. Property to the south is in the city of Wichita's zone single-family residential, and it's a relatively newer development with various number of homes going up, and there's some property that has not been developed within it yet. Property to the west is zone rural residential, and it's in Sedgwick County, and it's a agricultural field. The property was zone limited industrial in 2017. Obviously, the market never chose this area for any type of industrial development. And as we've been seeing along the Greenwich corridor, we've actually been seeing several other types of down zonings going on in this area, away from industrial type of uses, going back more towards like commercial or even residential type uses in the area. As I mentioned before, the PUD shows a proposed 60-foot new right-of-way along the east side of the property. East 37th Street is a two-lane county arterial, and Greenwich is also a two-lane county arterial at this location. Both of them are paved. Platting would require any additional improvements to them if they need. Since they're not providing access, you may not be getting XL lanes or decel lanes. When it comes to future improvements, that'll be something right now as determined by the county. Whenever they would want to make additional improvements for widening or creating more lanes along 37th or Greenwich, or when to signal the intersection of 37th and Greenwich. As we heard previously, we're looking at the 29th and Greenwich signalization happening usually by the end of the year. Whenever traffic counts mayor to signal at 37th and Greenwich, it would be at that point that signalization would likely happen. Municipal water and services are available because of the single-family residential neighborhood to the south. They'll be extended to the north at the applicant's expense, and all that determined at the time of platting. The comprehensive plan identifies it for appropriate for new residential and employment mix. This means the PUD does not have any proposal for commercial uses, but in the new residential commercial mix category that says typically that housing densities would likely be a little higher in density versus lower density residential uses. Overall, staff is recommending approval subject to the conditions, and the biggest condition being approval of the recommended text that is in your staff report. Other than some cleaning up language on item number 9 in terms of correctly citing different codes for screening, the only added language that staff has is requiring the screening along the south boundary, in addition to cleanup language on item 16, changing out the city of Wichita to the planning department. As I mentioned before, and just as a reminder, the Citizens Advisory Board's recommendation included additional language saying that landscaping could be used to satisfy the screening requirement. So that's something to consider for you all today. I've recently heard some public comment. You guys received an email today, and there's a handout of that email at your desk regarding concerns of multifamily development. On one of the phone calls I had earlier this week when I was explaining that with single-family patio homes and there's just more cluster development, that seemed to appease their concern. There may be other folks who would like to speak about that today, and I'll let them express their concerns for you. With that, I can stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Yeah, this area has not been platted yet.
No, it has not.
Okay, thank you. We see so many, and it's hard to keep them in track. And the site plan that we've been given on page 9, this is just it's not anything that's set and confirmed that this is how it's going to look, and this is all the access and all that kind of stuff.
Correct, because some of the things will have to be determined at the time of platting. If the access points that are shown on the right-of-way are deemed too close, then they would have to put a different, they'd have to space them apart. their proposal is to not have access off of 37th Street. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen in the future. That will be determined at the time of plating. This was just their concept of what they're proposing to do.
Yeah, because I can already see where, fire may have some issues with the way, the concept as it is right now. And so I fully understand that's all this is just a concept drawing, not what's going to actually take place out.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Williams-Bey?
Do we know whether these units are going to be built for sale or rent?
My understanding with them being on one unified parcel that they're likely for rent, but I will defer to the applicant or agent to confirm that.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, thank you. Applicant or agent?
Afternoon, Phil Meyer with Boffman Company, agent for the applicant. With me here today is Jeff Mullins, who is the applicant with Ritchie Development. So what we're trying to do here is a unique concept to multifamily or rentals. Our intent is this property is rental, something different from the duplexes you're seeing go in all over town, something a little more creative. Ritchie Development did do the Brookfield development to the south. They have this quarter section that you see to the north. There you go. So I'm not sure that black outline is absolutely right. It's close. That purple is all industrial. That is 160 acres. We've got 25.8, 26 acres, so ideally it's there, but it's a little too far north. That's showing 40 acres, so we don't have quite that much up there. We could have done this development, I thought, when we started with a simple down zone to MF18. We are industrial, so we could have just down zoned it to MF18 and had the density. You'll notice with this PUD that we've restricted it down from MF18 to 8.8 units per acre, which matches the acreage we have in the concept plan. So to answer Commissioner Green's question, that is just a concept plan. It is subject to change. It will change as we go through the planning process. I'm not saying that the developer won't change it, but I know City Hall will probably change portions of that. So we did with the 25 plus acres have its 1,000-foot notice on the radius that went out for the notification for adjacent landowners. We do fully intend to annex to Wichita and bring in sewer and water from the city of Wichita. At CAB, they suggested that we allow the opportunity for landscape screening, to allow landscaping to be used for our screening. We were perfectly good with that and still are today if the Planning Commission likes that idea. So with that, I may be brief now. I may ask for a little more on the rebuttal, but we'll just see what happens as we hear neighbors' concerns.
Any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Hartman.
Are these going to be private streets?
They are private streets. Now, the street we're proposing to the east side of it will be public. Everything interior to this will be private street like an apartment complex, but these will be patio homes and there could be duplex or something also. They could be attached too, but it's not a apartment complex that's 2-story and 8 units inside of it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, will you be marketing to older people, or is this an all ages unit?
Our intent today is this is an all ages unit with not only the site location, but some of the amenities they're putting in it. But elderly are more than welcome to live here, but it will be open to all ages.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Anybody else in the commission chamber want to speak on this item? Please come forward and give us your name.
Brian Stewart, 11413 East Brookview Court, Wichita, Kansas, 67216. I live in Brookfield, the development right to the south of that. How long do I have? 3 minutes? Thank you. So there are dozens of locations within Wichita that can provide PUD opportunities for which infrastructure and public transportation already exists that are now and have been for years empty, deteriorating, and decaying. So, and my understanding is a PUD is the Planned Unit Development Zoning District, is a special purpose zoning district, is intended to encourage innovative land planning and design and avoid monotony. What I saw was monotony, sometimes associated with large developments by, that sounds real nice, and that was basically a sketch. But what I saw is, that was not innovative and not compatible with the surrounding area that we all bought and developed homes in. So, and call it what it is, what I saw was duplexes, and it's just like the picture I've got on the flyer. I walked my neighborhood the other night and talked to 26 people, and not a single person was in favor of what's being planned, not a one. And some of them, I think, are online and may also be here today. So, it sounds nice, but it looks like it's just, it allows duplexes and high-density rental housing with a developer making a profit at our homeowners' expense rather than innovative and better long-term gentle-density housing solutions. That's high density. That's over 8 units per acre. That's high density. And high density would drive we all have spent $500,000 to $1 million on our homes in that area. And high density, if it's higher than the county average, drives values down 13.8%. So, for some of us, that's $65,000 to $125,000 that we go in the hole. As opposed to what I saw in Cup 33, that was innovative. That was nice. Lots of green spaces, underground parking. That's what a PUD is for, not for duplexes that are going to be rented out. And I've lived in a duplex over in Bel Air. But that's what that is a duplex. So Wichita needs better high density housing options. But we need PUDs in high density housing areas with existing infrastructure, not negatively impacting homeowners in Brookfield who've invested their life's earnings into a property they assume to be surrounded by other comparable and compatible properties. There's other places, the Greenwich and K96 corridor for 3 miles to the south, that's commercial, and there's lots of things. And Top Golf just got put in our backyard. We can see it like the Great Pyramids of Giza, So we've got an airport to the west, we've got Top Golf and everything to the south, and we've got 3 miles of commercial development. When we built our homes and bought those properties, we thought we were going to be building an area that was going to be, single family.
Sir,
with
do you need
innovative
more
housing.
time?
Pardon?
Do you need more time? Your time's up.
Could I have 30 seconds?
Okay.
So, thank you. So, what we're looking for is a win-win. We like the idea of we want a variety of housing. You actually get better market value when you have a variety of housing, and we actually have patio homes in that northeast corner. And what's in that northeast corner doesn't seem to be what's being proposed in the southwest corner to the north of us. So we'd ask that you would not approve this. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, Speaker?
I just
Mr.
have
Green?
one. I don't know do you know how long this area out there has been zoned limited industrial? Was it possible that 97 was when?
The staff report says since 2017.
Yeah, 2017. Yeah, 2017 was the LI for at least this parcel. And it looks like south of this is south of, is it the subdivision Brookview? Brookfield is the subdivision. Brookfield. Was that limited industrial? And so originally that was limited industrial, and then it was zoned SF5. And it's limited industrial to the south and limited industrial to the north of the Brookfield subdivision. So, okay.
Next speaker, please.
Mr. Chairman, before he gets up here, isn't the property still in zone light industrial? They haven't changed the zoning on it yet. It's still zoned like all the rest of the section of section of ground is.
Yeah, and they want a PUD, they're not
No,
changing
I'm
the
still
zoning.
saying, it's still zoned. We don't,
Go ahead,
it
sir.
stays zoned unless something happens.
Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Rick Heiss. I live at 3601 North Crest Street in Brookfield, Ritchie Development. Basically, I just have some questions. My questions are, number one, what are these buildings going to look like? We've seen no architectural renderings. We don't know what the elevations look like. Nothing like what the previous people brought up here. So you're basically approving a pig in a poke. We don't know what these are going to look like. They could look like the stuff over at 53rd and Rock, that area there. Matter of fact, while my home was being built, we lived in a duplex over there. So I think that we need some kind of drawings to evaluate what we're getting in our neighborhood. You've answered my question. Are they rentals? Well, I had another question. Are these rentals going to be available for rent subsidies? I'm assuming, who's going to be the developer and owner? Is it going to be the Ritchie Development? We don't know. Or is it going to be somebody like the people that went in there at 21st and 127th next to Hawthorne and across from Magdalene Church? That thing's been sitting there. We're starting the third season on that. And it's just sitting there empty. You know, maybe when you do these high-density facilities, you need to make the developers put up a surety bond so that you know that these facilities are going to get built and we don't have an eyesore in our neighborhood. I've got a problem with stormwater runoff. Phil alluded to the fact that they are going to have a detention pond up there. Well, I'd kind of like to know what the calculations are on that detention pond because my home backs up to Dry Creek. And I don't know whether, obviously you people have not been out in that development, I don't believe. But anyway, there's I want to say a 6-cell box culvert there. Well, these last few rains that we've had several months ago, we're within inches of that box culvert being filled. So I'm concerned about all the development that may happen. You know, we're getting more and more stuff at Jabbar Airport. We've got a fairly significant amount of water that's coming down through that neighborhood. And I know there were calculations developed at one time, but I'm concerned that we may be looking at some flooding in our area. So it'd be kind of a shame with the size of some of those homes in there I don't know, if you've ever been through a flood, you don't want to be through one. Been there, done that.
Sir, do you need additional time?
Yeah, just give me a couple minutes here. The property access that they're showing is on the east side of their development. I'm curious how much traffic is going to come down through our development instead of going over and maybe having a stop sign or something on Greenwich Road and 37th. So that's a possibility. You know, Brian brought up what could the resulting negative impact to the values of our properties be? Well, hell, we don't know that. But there's certainly that possibility. You know, and again, what is a PUD? Is it just a way to wrap up an apartment complex or duplexes? I don't know, it's kind of what it appears to be in this particular situation. And I went through your golden rules of zoning, and you know, zoning's what's best use for this property. But of the 9 bullet points in there was 5 of those that could possibly be negative. So anyway, I'd ask that we get some better ideas of what they're proposing in there. I mean, we don't know whether Ritchie's are going to develop it. They could sell it. Anybody could develop it. But I think we need to lock them down to what they're going to build. Thank you. Please.
Any questions, to the speaker? Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please. Next speaker? Is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item?
Yes, Michelle Thompson.
Give us your name and address, please.
It's 11514 East Winston Street. I live in Brookfield.
Go ahead.
So I just have more of like a comment and kind of a concern is when we actually went to go purchase this home when we were looking for homes in 2020, we were told by a Ritchie representative that the land that backs up to our home, which is the land that we're talking about right now, we were told that it would be single-family homes, kind of like in Brookfield, and that most likely it'd be 8 to 10 years. So I know things can change and plans can change, but I just want to know why they told us that in the first place a year, not even 2 years ago. I just feel like we were misled. And if they would have told us maybe what exactly they were planning, we might not have purchased that home. So I just kind of feel misled in a way. And I just want to know also if they think that the Circle Elementary School that's there would be able to take in the influx of maybe smaller children that might be moving in to a higher density population.
Anything else?
That is all.
All right, thank you. Anybody on the commission got a question or as a speaker? Thank you. Is there anybody else virtual want to speak on this item? Anybody else? Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Lair. I currently reside in Wichita at 12760 Bradford Circle. Thank you, commissioners, for allowing us to attend remotely. That's very considerate of you, and it makes participating in the commission's activities very convenient. I appreciate that. As I mentioned, I'm a Wichita resident. I'm actually building a home in Brookfield, just across 37th Street, as some of the previous speakers have noted. It's a neighborhood of single-family homes, $500 to $1 million in price range. There's even some higher value properties located a little further east of Brookfield. And so, as you can tell, there's a lot of concern about whether these units in the planned unit development are going to be out of character for this area. I would like to note that the Brookfield area, the Brookfield neighborhood, is really the only significant population center within quite a ways from this planned unit development, as you can see on the map. And Brookfield is currently under construction. It's not quite maybe half filled. So the number of constituents that potentially could speak out on this issue is fairly limited. And so if you are expecting a really large or wanting to see a really large bunch of constituents making comments on this, the actual number that could is fairly limited. So one of the things that concerns Brookfield residents is the character of the housing that's going across the street. We feel like the patio homes that are in the Brookfield area in the northeast section of our neighborhood are fairly compatible and nice homes with a decent density. But what we've seen on the drawings today look like something that's going to be quite out of character. Like Mr. Stewart, who spoken earlier, I'm very concerned that this will result in significantly detrimental effect on the property values of Brookfield. And we did not expect something like this to be coming into the immediate area. A couple of questions that I have for the developer or their agent is I would like to know if, or for the commission, is the developer required to adhere to the stated objectives of population density, number of units, and the type of units that they're proposing in this plan? Could they later on, after the motion has approved, if it is, could they switch to something different, such as apartment homes or duplexes or triplexes? We'd like to know that. Basically, if that were the case, it would be very out of character with the neighborhood, and I would strongly object to that. So I would like to see a little bit more information about the specific type of buildings that are proposed, elevation drawings, plans like that would be very helpful, such as the retirement community cooperative presented earlier. And furthermore, it would be great to see some level of commitment from the builder that they are going to stick to the proposed plan if approved.
Anything else?
That's really all I had to say. Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak out on this issue, and I would like to register my objection to the development as planned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hey, this is Kenny Flora.
Give us your address.
I'm at 3608 North Crest Court in the Brookfield development. And I'd just like to, thank my neighbors for coming and presenting and giving us the information of what's going on. I echo the previous comments of the announcement or the information passed along of this plan was I would deem inadequate. But more than anything, I'd just like to register the fact that, echoing what Lisa said, when we built our home in this neighborhood, the applicant here, Ritchie Development, assured us that no, they would not be selling this land or using this land in question for any purpose that would, it'd be detrimental to the home values in Brookfield, and they appear to be going back on that commitment or at least, what they had promised previously. So a little disappointed in that and just wanted to register my objection as well. Thanks.
Any questions, speaker? Thank you, sir. Anybody else virtual want to speak on this item?
Hi, this is Laura Hands, also a Brookfield resident at 3613 Crest Street.
Go ahead.
So we'll echo Lisa and Kenny and kind of the misleading nature of kind of property use to the north and the statements that Rick and the Bryants have also made. So agree with all of that. I just wanted to raise a broader point too as a Wichitan, that kind of the same day that Brian had shared this with us, it was on the news also that, the renewed effort of the city of Wichita to really strengthen its core. And I know y'all are waiving permitting so that, to inspire renovation and redevelopment and really, ensure the strength of our community throughout. And it was just ironic getting both of these notifications in the same day. And I do think we need to think through, we're a declining population, and the more that we continue to allow the sprawl, it certainly seems to be in conflict with our priority of strengthening the city's core. So that's just one addition that I'll add with the other comment. Thank you.
Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anybody else virtual wants to speak on this item? Anybody else? Hearing none. Agent, got 2-minute rebuttal time.
I'm not sure how to respond to some of these, so I'll give it my best effort and see how we do here. So this is an appropriate use of a PUD. Like I mentioned earlier, I could have downzoned this to MF18 to achieve this goal. We were willing to put some additional restrictions on this so that planning commissioners and adjacent landowners know what we're committing to and what we're willing to do to make sure that it's not a normal apartment complex. This property is going to be developed by the Ritchie Development. They are the developers of it. I think a lot of the concerns the adjacent landowners in Brookfield gave you is my answer to you. They owned over half of the lots still in Brookfield that's not developed. We're not going to do anything on this corner that is going to affect their ability to finish the development at Brookfield, nor are we going to do anything that's going to affect our ability to finish developing the 134 acres that surround this corner. We don't have building elevations today. They're still working on that, but we're looking at a high quality looking development. And I'd point out to the Planning Commission that I don't know the absolute density, but Perfection Builders has got the courtyards in Brookfield being developed on the northwest corner of their property, and that's 5-6 units per acre. We're 8.8. I don't hear people complaining about the quality of the courtyards at Brookfield that's being built there. So from a density, you can't, it was mentioned that at 8.8 units per acre, we're guaranteed to devalue the property values of the stuff to the south. I don't know that I buy that. There's no proof that multifamily causes devaluation of single family, and we can take
Mr. Myers, your time's up. Do you need some additional time?
Yeah, I'm gonna take 2 more minutes.
Okay, granted.
I was brief in the beginning, so I could grab that there. There's no proof that multifamily has a negative effect on property values. And there are places all over town where multifamily is existing next to single family, and it should be allowed. There's a comment about sprawl. I mean, you need to look at this area as future growth of the city of Wichita. Greenwich Road is going to be a 5-lane facility someday. Yes, there will be a traffic signal at 29th and Greenwich and 37th and Greenwich when they're warranted. 37th Street's going to be at least a 2-lane. I'm going to tell you a 3-lane facility or more. And it's hard to visualize that when you drive up and down the road today, but this is where the city of Wichita is growing to. And 20 years from now, that whole corridor is going to look completely different. So I do know that Ritchie will be the developer of this. They have been working, they work with the school district, so they've told the school district their plans for the whole quarter section just to let them know, because that's how they try to operate. I'll take you back to start at Lake Point and go through the Ritchie developments. They're quality developments that stand true for 20 years, and that's where they're going with this one. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. One of the speakers was concerned about the water, the drainage.
Yeah, I missed that one. I just saw that when I was standing there. I wrote that one down.
If you could elaborate just a little bit on that. We know what happens with drainage when it comes to situations like this.
Yeah.
But if you could.
And absolutely, I know exactly what he's talking about with the culverts and going through Brookfield and the floodplain that was through there and the amount of drainage that goes through there. If you looked at the concept plan we gave you, that Reserve A is our drainage detention facility so that we meet the requirements of the city of Wichita on drainage. And we will detain our water in that Reserve A before we release it and send it downstream. So that is how we meet. The city has a stormwater manual for not only detention requirements, but stormwater quality. And we have that accounted for in this development, and through the plating process, we'll go through all the recommendations or the requirements to show the city we've met that.
And that'll be handled at plating time.
That's handled during the plating, yes.
Yep.
And it's called out in our PUD too, that we will meet those requirements.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. McKay?
I have a statement to make. Talking about floodwater, if you look, subdivision to the south, it's got a lot more drainage problems than this piece of ground has altogether. If you look to the east of the area where these folks are building their houses or live, and where they're going through, look up on page 11. It'll show you that light blue deal, that's the drainage areas of project, and the one we're looking at, it doesn't have hardly any to speak of compared to what's there already, so that may be a good point.
Any other questions? Ms. Williams-Bay.
Yeah, I'm reading staff comments here, and it says that there will be architectural control for these additional units that are going to be built. Is that correct?
Yes, we wrote into the PUD that we had to have a residential character to the architecture just to make sure that it fit. And so there is some architectural requirements written into the PUD.
Anybody else? Mr. Blick?
Just want to verify, a resident was asking, it looks like your street that you're proposing is going to be on the east side, and it doesn't look like you'll make a through Bristol, correct? So it won't go into their neighborhood from that street, it looks like?
Correct. We don't have any intentions of lining up with Bristol Street. We have the appropriate separation required by engineering to not align those. And so I don't think any of our traffic's going to be wandering through Brookfield to get to Greenwich. They're going to take the path of least resistance, which is 37th.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Well, and of course, all of that's going to be contingent upon the planning process when you go through that,
Yes.
exactly how this is all going to lay out.
We still have to meet subdivision regulations, which
Sure.
is step 2.
Any other questions? No, your time's done. Your time's done. Hey. Your time is up. We respected you when you talked. We expect you to respect us when we bring it back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move approval per staff comments.
I'll second.
Motion to approve by Mr. Dool, second by Mr. Hartman.
Do we want to add comments about allowing landscaping to create this separation? Is that
What?
previous? Never mind.
Yeah.
The
They
Citizens
agree.
Advisory Board added a stipulation that the screening can be accomplished by landscaping as well. It's not requiring landscaping to do it, but they just want to give them the option. That was part of the recommendation from the Citizens Advisory Board.
Should that be included in the
Would you
If that is
include
the
that
will
in
of
my
your
motion?
board.
And I'm glad that you brought, go ahead and finish your thought, Ms.
Well,
Fox.
I would include that in my motion, that a natural screening would be an option.
And by natural screening, could that also include berms as opposed to walls or fences?
That is correct. If they were to use landscaping to meet the screening standard, it would likely be landscape berms because it has to produce a solid effect, just like a wall or a fence would.
Okay. Thanks for bringing that back up.
Anything else?
Pardon me just a second. The clarification is for us is that this came from the DAB. They approved it, they came from the DAB, so I think that probably should be, and the applicant has agreed to do so, so I think that in their motion should probably say, we approve subject to staff comments and the recommendation from DAB.
Quick clarification, that's the CAB, correct? It was, so it's in the county, so it wasn't District Advisory Board, it's Citizens.
Or
Advisory Board.
whatever group it was, yeah.
County advisory.
I just said DAB because but I think that should be part of the motion.
And I think Mr. Dool did include that.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Next item is 4.8, zoning 2022-00038.
Good afternoon, everyone. Christina Reith, Associate Planner. This is case number zone 2022-38. This is located out in the county. The applicant is Chad Dean, and he has a property that's currently zoned RR Rural Residential, and he is requesting a zone change to SF20 Single Family Residential. This is generally located on the north side of West 69th Street North, within 1/4 mile east of West 69th Street North and North Hoover Road. I believe the address is 4900 West 69th Street North. They're proposing some single-family residential dwellings, and the recommendation by the staff is to approve. The subject site is 3.45 acres in total, and it's in unincorporated Citrus County. So these 3 lots that they're subdividing the property for would be to develop single-family dwellings on approximately 1 acre lots. Properties to the north and west of the subject property are zoned RR rural residential, as well as to the south and to the east. However, there are single-family residential zoning, SF20, approximately 1/2 mile to the east, and there are 1-acre lots on the northeast corner of West 69th Street North and North Hoover Road. So it's not out of character to have single-family residential dwellings of 1-acre lots here. So the property is currently unplatted, but it will be subdivided via a lot split in accordance with sub 2022-38. The requested zoning is in conformance with the community investments plan. The map identifies the area to be within the rural growth area, and single-family detached homes on larger lots are thus appropriate for this area. The land is currently used for a single-family residential dwelling. The one that's on site was constructed in 1952, so the use of the property will remain about the same. Based upon the information available at the time the staff report was completed, staff recommends approval of the zone change request. I have been in conversation with one concerned gentleman. He didn't say whether he was in favor or opposed to the development necessarily, but we have been in conversation. And it doesn't go to the county advisory board, I believe, until September 12th, so there's no ruling on that yet. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Any questions? Staff? Guess not, thank you. Applicant or agent?
Hi there, my name is Chad Dean. I have the applicant and own the house at 4900 West 69th Street North, Valley Center, Kansas, 67147. Just trying to get this changed to SF20. If you guys have any questions.
Any Greenwich staff comments?
Okay, yeah. Just ask for you guys to approve it. Thanks.
Any questions of the applicant? Guess not. Anybody else here in the commission chamber to speak on this item?
Brian Stewart, 11413 East Brookview Court, Wichita, Kansas, 67226. It's I've noticed in the times there's been, people for or against, and in this case, it's just the applicant. I guess my question to the council is that at what point when everybody is in either for or against, I can understand the being for, but when everybody speaks out against particularly something, why does the council still go in favor of it? Because this is the second time I've come to a council meeting on a PUD. The other case, 13 people objected. Today, 8 or 9 on a different one, and yet you still voted in favor. So I guess I'm just curious how when all citizens seem to be objecting to something.
I guess I hope you understand there's a procedure we follow. And every one of us has got no interest in any of this. We basically look at a case-by-case basis and we vote accordingly. Do we always agree? No.
Right.
But we heard your case and it was voted on.
I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm in favor of this gentleman's application.
Anybody else in the commission chamber want to speak on this item?
Wes Wilson, 6327 North Hoover, Wichita, 67204. We've lived at our residence for 36 years. Don't know everything that's going on, but with 3.5 acres, putting single dwellings, we don't know where the water's coming from. It's going to be well water, where you're coming from, what kind of drainage for the sewage or septic tank or lateral fields, or none of that's been presented. We haven't seen anything about housing. I kind of been thrown in as this kind of late. The guy that was going to come, sister passed away, and he went to her funeral this afternoon, so that got canceled, and the other guy that was going to come had to leave town. So that's our concerns or questions, is we don't know what he's trying to build. We haven't seen anything or heard anything about that, what he's gonna build and how he's gonna get, bend the rules or whatever. I know somebody within a mile of there had a hard time getting lateral fields on 5 acres. So we don't know where the sewage is gonna go and how that's gonna be treated. Haven't seen anything about it. I didn't have any information until we picked this up today. He's been on the phone, not lacking getting phone calls returned to get any information, so we're kind of shooting in the dark at this right now. So that's why I'm here.
As far as the septic and water and the drainage and all that, that will be addressed as is in this meeting. It'll have to be approved in order to get a permit to build anything. Is that correct, Scott?
Yes, that's correct. Right now, it's really talking about the land use and the density, so how many units could be on the property or what can the property be used for. And that's the zoning process. Separate process, but related, would be platting, and that is, how is the property going to be laid out? How will utilities access, or what services will be provided to provide services for the property?
We were aware, or I was aware, that there would be another meeting on the 12th of next month. I may not be able to attend that. I'm going in the hospital for a while, but any rate, I was kind of filling in for this and trying to get some information, but this will help with that, and we'll be better prepared if we need to have somebody else come represent us than at the 12th. So.
Okay, anything else?
No, that's it from me.
All right, any questions, the speaker?
I'd like to make a comment. Scott, they have to, as far as a septic tank or lateral field or the lagoon or anything else like that, that's got to be set up by the state, does it not?
You know,
or approved by the state?
There are the standards for that.
Right, that's what I meant, the standards.
And they're going to have to meet those standards. Yes. And, you know, so in order to get their permits, they're going to have to be able to meet those standards. They've taken that into account with how they've proposed to lay out that property through the platting process.
And also out there in this area, I would imagine that they'll have to go to rural water district, I would imagine, to get their water.
There's nobody that I know of anywhere near me that's on rural water. It's all well water.
Well, then if
they
can get the water, then no different than your place.
Yeah. Well, I think, isn't there a limit on how many wells you can have on a certain amount of land?
Again, there's codes on all of that that we don't.
There's rules and regulations on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got some work to do before he builds.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else want to speak on this item? Anybody else? Is there anybody virtual want to speak on this item?
He's the
applicant.
That's the landowner. Anybody virtual want to speak on this item? Seeing none, you got 2 minutes of rebuttal.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say that Tim Wagner with Sedgwick County Health Department came out and did a sample soil test system, and it passed, sent us a letter in, and we're just in the process of passing that, but it did go through. And I want to say he lives about 2 miles away, and everybody's on septic and water, well water, I should say. So just wanted to give that to you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Bring it back to commission. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move for approval.
We got a motion by Mr. Hartman,
Second.
second by Ms. Fox. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
We're not adjourned.
Now we got Mary.
Chris will be unhappy.
And I thought we took this on a consent item. I didn't think we was gonna hear it.
I move for approval.
Joe just moved for approval. I second.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. Mary Hunt, Metropolitan Area Planning Department. Today we bring you the City of Wichita Capital Improvements Program for the 10-year period of 2023 through 2032. As you know, the state requires the CIP to be presented to you and asking you if it conforms with the comprehensive plan, what we call the Community Investments Plan. Okay. The Advanced Plans Committee heard this earlier this month and agreed to bring it forth to this full Planning Commission. So staff has reviewed the CIP, and in our opinion, it's consistent with the visions, the values, the principles of this plan. The memo you have provides, lists the priorities we use to conduct our evaluation. So staff concludes that the CIP is in conformance. However, conformity could be increased by allocating a little more funding to the maintenance of infrastructure, especially in the ECA. Mr. Manning, our finance director, will share with you the things they take into account when preparing the CIP, of which the comprehensive plan is just one. If you have any questions for me, I'll take them now. Otherwise, I'll turn the podium over to Mr. Manning, and you can hear his presentation. Anyone?
Thank you, Mary. Any other questions for Mary before we pass the podium? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Mr. Mann.
Is he like any other agent or applicant? He has 10 minutes.
Yes, and I'm the timer.
I'm going to need more time. I will try to be very brief. Thank you for having me this afternoon. I presented to your advanced plans, Zach presented to your advanced plans subcommittee, so a lot of this will be a refresher for a lot of you. So I will try not to go through it in too much detail. Again, I'm Mark Manning with the Department of Finance. I want to present to you our CIP. Mary is right. The comprehensive investments plan is a very important criteria in what we do. Several other things are, we obviously account for the City Council's goals and missions and everything we do, including the CIP, and we also solicit citizen feedback when we develop the CIP. Just a brief overview of where the money comes from for the CIP. The CIP is about $2.4 billion, billion with a B, a lot of money. That's over 10 years. A lot of it is water and sewer utility revenue. We're, of course, going to use that to replace our pipes and to build new sewer treatment plant, a new water treatment plant. But that's a very large portion of our CIP. But we also do have federal funds that come in. We have a lot of sales tax money that we collect from our sales tax that the county has that they share with us. And we also have a little bit of property tax revenue. That's actually a fairly small portion of our CIP, though. Where do they go? Sorry, I thought I hit the wrong button. Where does our CIP dollars go? Again, water and sewer, if that's our largest revenue share, that's our largest expenditure share. So a lot of our CIP is for our utility operations. We're also going to spend a significant portion of it on streets. Some of that is in new development through special assessments. A lot of that is through sales tax in our existing areas. And then we have a lot of other smaller areas, parks. We're going to spend some on our heavy equipment. We're going to spend some on public safety and a few other areas. This is probably one of the most important slides in my presentation, again, because as Mary pointed out, your objective is to determine if what I'm presenting to you is in conformance with the Community Investments Plan. Community Investments Plan, of course, has three priorities. Priority number one is the one that we focus on mostly. You can see about 50% roughly of our CIP is aligned to priority one. And I'd also point out to you that that percentage would be higher. A couple things drag us down a little bit. One is we do have a lot of money in our CIP for special assessments. That's a speculative amount that we put in. We don't know what's going to occur in that area, but that's about $300 million, and that's obviously not considered maintenance. So that drags our maintenance percentage down a lot. So that's one reason our maintenance is not higher. But still at 50%, I think that's pretty good. This table aligns to your other metric that you have in the Community Investments Plan, and that is what is considered a very high priority. You can see about 70% of the CIP is aligned with your very high priority area in the Community Investments Plan. And again, one thing that drags us down here, as you can see, is highways. We have a lot of money in for highways, although I point out the vast majority of that is state and federal money that is flowing to the city. But that 13% is low medium, and that's one thing that probably drags us down a little bit on this area. So let's talk about some of the specific areas, and I'll be a little brief, but I'll try to relate them to the ECA that Mary mentioned and the relevancy there. We have about $168 million in for pavement maintenance in our CIP. It's been a huge priority for the city of Wichita for the last 6 or 7 years. One thing I will point out this year, though, is we have allocations for pavement maintenance and allocations for dirt street paving. That's an emerging issue that is becoming a priority for some, so the CIP, at least as it's formed today, would allocate about $31 million to start addressing unpaved or dirt streets in our area. Are you flipping the slides for me, or is it, okay, I thought, wow, that thing's sensitive, because every time I get my hand close, it flips. Wow, okay.
Part of the time.
You're good, very good.
I've got a question on the dirt street paving.
Yes, sir.
Is that going to be a special assessment also, or is that just something where we're going to go into neighborhoods and pave dirt roads where in other areas we've had to go through special assessments and petitioned to have these projects built?
It's an excellent question, Commissioner Green. Our current practice is to pave dirt streets when they're petitioned and assess them through special assessments. This would be a policy shift. This would use city funds, sales tax funds, to pay for the city to pay for the cost of paving those streets. Again,
so that then takes money away from other needed areas that could be taken care of, whether it's bridges or whatever.
It would involve a reallocation of our pavement maintenance funding to unpaved roads instead of paved roads. Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay.
So let's look at how sales tax funding is spent. As you know, sales tax funding can only be spent for roads, bridges, and freeways by city ordinance. In the early years, we were very, very heavy on freeways and had a much smaller allocation for roads. About 3 years ago, the city had a policy shift, and we've allocated more for roads and far less for freeways. So our strategy going forward is that we will use our sales tax funds to leverage other dollars. So if there's opportunities to partner with the state of Kansas, we'll allocate freeway LST funds for freeways, but the city does not have the capacity now to fully complete freeway improvements like we did in the past. So what we've got now is the North Junction and East Kellogg, both of which we're partnering with the state. West Kellogg is primed for 2 interchanges. We have the frontage roads built, we have all the right-of-way, but again, we probably will not have funding to complete interchanges on West Kellogg unless or until we can convince the state to partner with us in that area. And I point out also the freeway component is, 7%, 8% of our total sales tax spending. So let's talk about keeping Wichita safe. That's one of our goal areas. We have about $150 million in this area, and that's police stations and fire stations. I'd point out, I think 3 of the police stations are in the ECU. 1 may not be. The one in West Wichita probably won't be. Fire stations, it's a pretty even split. We'll probably start building a little bit more out on the fringe as our city has grown. That's typically where we have challenges in coverage on the fire side. But having said that, a lot of our older ones are in the core area, the ECU, and we'll probably replace some of those as well. One big thing that this is the same presentation I use for other audiences, and this is probably a more relevant slide for those other audiences, but we will have about $18 million to maintain our Century 2 Convention Center. Won't say a whole lot more. It's pretty obvious what the challenges there are, but we'll spend $18 million for Century 2. This slide may look familiar because I think we had the exact same slide in last year, but just to reiterate, we do have $36 million to try to address some of the challenges over on Bleckley Street over in East Wichita. That's developing what the solution is, I think, has been a problem for Public Works, but there is capacity to begin addressing that challenge. Okay. We have a lot of money in the CIP for parks. Again, a lot of those are in the ECU. Some are not. LW Clap obviously is. We've got about $10 million for that. We have money in for Plainview Park. We have some dog park money. We'll also renovate some of our branch libraries, most of which are in the ECU as well. And I forgot to point one other thing out on streets. Your staff pointed out correctly that a lot of our street funding is outside the ECU, and how maybe we could be in better conformance if we had less street funding outside the ECU. Again, I don't dispute that assertion because it's true, but I will point out one thing. And that is typically in our CIP. In the early years, most of our street money is tilted towards the ECU. It's typically funding in the out years that is tilted away from the ECU. For example, in the early years, we have the West Street corridor, which is part of which is outside the ECU, but that's a long corridor. But we also have a lot of money in for Douglas. We've got a lot of money in for downtown streets and money in up at North between the Canal Route and Broadway on 21st Street. So again, the tilt towards the ECU is a little bit more pronounced in the out years than it is in the earlier years. Here's our calendar. We're very close to the end of our process. In fact, next Tuesday, we'll ask the City Council to adopt the CIP, hopefully with your agreement that it is in conformance with the Comprehensive Investments Plan. But we have had a long process. Again, the point of this slide is that we're at the end of the process. I'd point out that our CIP is available online with that little QR code right there. You can find it right now if you have a phone out. Or you can visit us at wichita.gov anytime, where it's also available at our branch libraries. And with that, again, appreciate the assistance of your staff in the development of the CIP, because they do play a role, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. This spring and summer, we had a lot of high water in the Little Arkansas, and it has done a lot of damage to the Manissa Bridge. Not only that, but there's been deferred maintenance on it, and it has so many gaps in between the bricks and the tops of the columns that I'm afraid if it goes through the winter, it's going to get ruined with the freeze and thaw. But even the approach on the east end is cracked and crumbling. But I think it's settled quite a bit. And it's a historic bridge that we spent, I don't know, $3.2 million on in 2007. And then we upgraded that whole area with a walkway. I mean, a biking path. 1.7 million on the school to match the architecture of the bridge and the school. It just seems like we have a lot invested, but nothing's being put back into our historic bridges. They also pile up with those big wood dams that put a lot of pressure on bridges, on the pylons, and we clear it from the bridge at the castle all the way through to Murdoch. We clear all that from those bridges, but we do nothing for the historic Bidding Bridge or the historic Manissa Bridge. I was just wondering, where does bridge maintenance for historic property fit into all this? Where would it come from if we started spending money on it?
Yeah, I'll answer your question this way. We do have every year $1 million that we allocate in the capital improvement program for structural issues on bridges such as that. And Public Works, I think, is very good about inspecting all of our bridges periodically and addressing any challenges. So I'm going to guess they're probably well aware of some of the issues that you've noted, and I would hope that didn't be prioritized with that $1 million. Another thing I'd point out to you, which you didn't mention, but I'm sure you're aware of this too, the sculptures on the top of the bridge, my understanding is there's a little bit of deterioration in some of those, and you didn't ask this question, but I'll answer it anyway for you. We do have funding in the operating budget for maintaining our public art, so it would not surprise me if we'll spend a little bit of that and try to fix some of those, they're not sculptures, but the things on there. I'm not
that's important to know, because I didn't know that the art budget was for anything but new art at new developments.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you. Hopefully I answered it correctly for you.
Yep, thank you.
How many miles of unpaved roads do we have in the city of Wichita?
My understanding is we have about 167 lane miles. That's, of course, different than miles, but we have 167 lane miles.
And then how much would it cost the city to pay all of that off?
I don't remember that, although I do have a report that may be online, but I can tell you with $31 million, we expect that we can pave about 40 lane miles. So I guess if you want to extrapolate that, then 4 times 30 would be 120 million. So I'm not an engineer, but that would be my guess if I had to guess. But I've actually got a report I'll try to flip to you.
And to give some perspective, the $300 million that's set aside for special assessment money, which is primarily the new developments on the fringe.
Yes, ma'am.
The amount being reserved to pave the interior miles. Could you characterize the income levels of the neighborhoods where those dirt streets are located for us?
Generally, very poor. If you look at the census tracts, most of those dirt streets are in poor areas, and in fact,
0 to 50% below area median income, likely?
I would guess that's very likely. In fact, part of our strategy will be to focus on those areas first.
And the likelihood of those areas being able to pay the special assessments?
I'd answer it this way. I'd say their interest in petitioning for us to assess them is probably very low.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So in the county, when people go out and build these homes that we seen earlier that are $500,000 to $1 million, does the county pay for those roads that go out there?
Yeah.
Or is that specially assessed out there?
I don't think the county is near as active in special assessments as the city is. I don't know exactly how they handle those. I can't answer your question very well. I think in some cases it's not uncommon for the roads to remain a dirt road until it's annexed into the city in a lot of cases, though.
Any other questions? May I bring it back to commission? Do we?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we take the recommended action that's on page 3 of our report.
Second. By Mr. Green, second by Ms. Fox. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the other item on here, we was approached the other day, 3 weeks ago. County is wanting to come up with a nuisance appeal board, which I don't know how many cases will ever come up in the county. Maybe 1 a year, 2 a year. But we have to come up with a board. And our thought the other day in the meeting was to take the county appointees, make them on the nuisance board. So with that, I'll turn it.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Chris Labor, Metro Area Building and Construction Department. So appreciate the commission members for giving us a few minutes today. Thank you for your service in general. And specifically, this is an appeals board. So unlike cities, cities have nuisance abatement rights. The county by state statute does not. Given our urban designation in Sedgwick, we were successful in achieving some legislation that allows us some very limited abatement authority in the unincorporated areas of Sedgwick now. With that, what that would mean is if we have a property that we as MAPCD declare a danger to the inhabitants of the county, that would also come with a health department assessment, potentially even KDHE involvement. We would take that to the Board of County Commissioners. If they agree with that, they would make that same declaration, potentially give a timeline for cleanup, et cetera, to the owner, and that would also give them the potential to bring that back for consideration for self-help nuisance abatement through the county. And this would be a little bit of an interesting arrangement because generally appeals boards see things before they would ever reach a council or a commission. In this case, that individual, the property owner, would be able to appeal the Board of County Commissioners' decision to declare their property a danger. They would also be able to declare or appeal, for example, timelines, et cetera. So the nuisance abatement code that we have would give this board some authority to extend timelines granted by the commission, or to even overturn would not be the right word. We can defer to Kirk if we need more. But they could request that the commission revisit that ruling, et cetera, before that we proceed with any actions. So for this, we do expect that it would be very rare. Again, the criteria are very restrictive. So at most, I would consider that we would convene this board. At most, we would abate a nuisance, I should say, once or twice a year. That would be like the absolute most. If you consider that every one of those gets appealed, then you'd be looking at a meeting once or twice. So the plan is to convene this board to establish bylaws, et cetera, and to go over basically what would be our routine administration of establishing a board And then after that, the board would only convene as required to hear any nuisance appeals. We would like to use experienced board members for this. We have MABCD board members who could serve, but none of my MABCD boards are directly appointed by individual commissioners. So that's why we look to the MAPC, because each commissioner has an appointment in this board. And so their thought was that we could potentially utilize, specifically, this would be both of the Johnsons, Bill and Joe, as well as Ms. Cunningham, Mr. Warren, and Mr. Blick, who would then be dual appointed to serve in that capacity. So the question to the commission today is if there is any comment, concern, opposition to that. If you all were to agree with this as a viable proposal, we would take it back to the commission to let them go forward with potentially appointing you. And the reason I bring that up is the two options we would have there is we would either separately appoint you to this board, and then going forward, each member appointed to the commission by a county commission or district would also be asked to do the same dual service, or we may actually look at amending the abatement code to state that the MAPC members would always serve in that dual capacity.
Mr. Deal?
I'm an at-large appointee to the county, so I'm glad I'm not included in that. But so if I understand what this is, this commissioner, this body would be in a position to either override or alter, amend what the county commission approved. Sounds to me like it's potentially fraught with some legal problems.
Well, in this situation, it is kind of a unique scenario where you would be somewhat doing that, but specifically you would be sending it back for reconsideration. And it would delay what an appeal, if the board was to uphold that appeal, it would specifically delay me from being able to take any further action until between the county commission, legal, and the members of the board, there was a determination in place.
In general, what kind of time frame are you looking at with this nuisance abatement board? You've got a property that's dilapidated, that needs to be raised, and yet you're hamstrung on the ability to be able to do what needs to be done because you're going through another bureaucratic step. How much time are we actually talking about? Weeks, months?
You ain't gonna change that.
Years?
And that process, yes, sir, is in place regardless. So specifically in the county, the process begins with a nuisance case. We have to have a court conviction in order to even begin the process of a potential abatement in the county. So if we got to that point, and then we and other agencies sought to declare at that level of nuisance, that level of the danger, we would take that to the commission. And then once the commission has given a ruling on that, assuming that they do declare it a danger to the inhabitants of the county, then the member would have a chance to appeal. In that case, we would set an appeal hearing with this board. The result of that would then be taken back to the county commission, and they would further consider it for either extension or to proceed with potential abatement. So and that is a great question about the legal aspect of that. So the resolution as drafted was drafted by our legal department. So they would actually be the ones to oversee that process as it went forward. So they would advise the commission, the board, and myself as far as what any as to what the next steps any decision would bring or would mean.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification, Chris. Bill made the comment there was going to be the county commission and the representatives of the county commission. Well, and Bob brought it up to at large. You and Bob, they're at large. They have to be appointed by all four of the commissioners.
And correct. So this is specifically established as a 5-member board. So it would be those 5 commission members that are directly
I just want the
appointed
clarification,
by
is all I
county
wanted.
commissioner. Yes, sir.
Because there is 7.
No, that's correct, Mr. McKay.
I have a question about a comment you made. You mentioned some self-help abatement. What did you mean by that?
So that would be the term that is generally used if the county was to go ahead and do that abatement. So in the case of a nuisance property, the judge is going to put a court order on the property or on the property owner that certain actions have to be completed by a certain date. If those are not complied with, this would give us the option to go through this process. At the end of that process, if the property owner still has not accomplished the abatement or still has not removed the nuisance conditions, we would be able to do that as the county, whether using our public works or whether using a contractor. We would accomplish that, and then we would assess the cost of that back to the property. So that part of the process.
You're not recommending any or have any programs that actually help the homeowner?
We do, actually. Those are separate from this. That would all, of course, take place prior to this.
Okay.
Yes, this would be completely separate and independent of those, but we do have programs and processes to work with property owners.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Step in real quick. Kirk Sponsor, Assistant County Counselor. I was referenced briefly by Chris Labram. I did just want to clarify one element in regards to the nature of the Nuisance Appeals Board. The determination would occur after the BOCC heard the situation. If the BOCC did decide it was a nuisance, then this Nuisance Appeal Board would hear it, and their determination would actually not be referred back to the BOCC. The determination would be considered final. So for those purposes, if the Nuisance Appeal Board did decide it was indeed a nuisance that did need to be addressed, the only way that could be appealed would be through the judicial means, so go to district court, things of that nature. But
all right, thanks for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm still curious as to what you think will be accomplished. I mean, it sounds like just another punitive step. Let's say the county made a decision and we decided to give somebody 60 more days. Is that the sort of decision you're looking for flexibility in their decisions, or are you looking for a board that will fortify your ability to do abatements and levy fines, or?
So, ma'am, this would be the appeals.
Fortify the enforcement aspect.
Well, this would be the appeals board. So any fines or anything associated with that would come through court. So we have an existing nuisance code. All cases, any nuisances are addressed through that code. We now also have an abatement code, which gives us, again, a very limited abatement authority. So this board-specific action, and I appreciate Kirk cleaning that up, because I was thinking that we would then readdress that to the BOCC, but that's right, it would have to go to judicial court. So if and when the BOCC declared a property a danger, then they would be telling me that we're going to go forward and require, and again, it depends on what the danger on the property is, but let's say it is a home that has had multiple fires, has got a lot of nuisance conditions on it, and they're saying that's a danger to the kids walking past it on the way to school. They're going to be saying, MAPCD, Director Labrum, we want you to go ahead and clean that up by whatever means that's required. We always hope the property owner will go ahead and take care of that, but if they don't, they're going to have me do it. Now, at that point, that property owner would be able to bring that decision and present it to this appeals board to say, I think my property was incorrectly or unfairly determined to be a danger to the inhabitants of Sedgwick County. If that board upheld their appeal, then we would stop action to abate at that point and decide to either leave it as is or to, again, seek a court action to proceed.
What do we need to do today with this?
Yeah.
And I will defer to our legal counsel and to you, Mr. Chairman. So at this point, our goal is to see if any, especially if any of the commission members who would be affected would be an objection to serving in this capacity. Also, if there are further concerns of the other commissioners in doing that. So we did not specifically ask for a motion and a vote, but if you all would like to do that, I would consider that appropriate and helpful. But again, I'll defer to Mr. Wadle and to Kirk for that, as well as you all, if you feel you would like to do that at this point.
Is there any opportunity for public discussion on this, or is this just limited to us? Because there are a couple sitting back there in the back of the room, and I don't know if they're wanting to speak to this. He's kind of nodding his head. And I don't know, that would be up to legal or whomever, or Scott maybe.
What I would indicate is that it's not a formal public hearing. You would have the discretion to open it up for public comment if you'd like.
And I will note, Mr. Green, that this is a county code. It is a county resolution at this point. So this process will occur, and we will appoint some level of a board. This is just our plan A for who we would like to have and how we would like to manage that board.
I guess I'd make the motion to do the 5 actual appointees of this.
Well, I think there ought to be more discussion on that. My county commissioner that appointed me was unaware that when you served on the MAPC that you also had to serve on a subcommittee. So she thought she was appointing somebody to work every other week. You're adding a third committee. I don't know. And I don't see this group as being the best to be objective about whether or not a property gets put back into circulation, because that's really what the end result is. If abatements come and somebody's elderly and they end up in the hospital, there's so many things that can happen to them that if they get behind on taxes and there's multiple abatements, they end up with no equity and they're forced to sell because.
Ms. Cunningham?
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to accomplish today, whether we're going to appoint the 5 county
Well,
commissioners.
I don't want to do it, so.
I'm sorry?
I'm one of the ones that would be available, but I'm not available for a third committee. I don't have that much time.
Mr. Blick? Blick's on. Who else was there? Joe, he's probably gone. I'm sure he would.
Mr. Warren was the other.
This is Joe. I made the motion to approve.
You said he left.
He said, he'd make a motion to approve.
Just tell him to say yes.
So I guess what I would say on that, one of the at-large appointees could fill in, since Ms. Cunningham don't want to do it.
Well, as a city representative, I'll second Joe's motion.
Well, just a point of clarification. So now we've got a motion to approve, but so my assumption is that the motion to approve is to approve indication or take action that the MAPC would be indicating that they are in favor of serving and don't have major objections. However, we do know that there's at least one member of the MAPC who is a county appointee who has indicated that they would be unable to serve in that capacity, as has been indicated and requested by staff during the presentation. So as part of the dialogue that the MAPC has used to try and arrive at this action is that the at-large members that have been appointed to the MAPC by the county would be able to serve as an alternate capacity for this board should the regularly appointed per district members were not able to serve in that capacity.
That was my motion. Yes, thank you, Scott.
Okay. And Kirk Sponsel, Assistant County Counselor, I don't want us to go too broad or wide-ranging on this. Certainly, this is just a feedback setting, so I don't think that the board today, the commission today, needs to take any formal vote. This was more of a feedback process to hear support, to hear opposition, specifically from those members that were specifically appointed by Board of County Commissioner members. Am I incorrect in synopsizing that one of the members specifically appointed is opposed to the idea, but the other four are receptive to the idea? Am I incorrect in that statement? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And I don't know that we need to go further at this juncture. Ultimately, it's the decision of the Board of the County Commissioners how they want to set this up. I don't know if they're even open to having an alternate serve. That's something that would be a discussion with them.
I'm sure there'll be additional meetings and so forth that iron all this out, so.
Right.
And in those future meetings that the chairman has alluded to, will there be opportunity for public comment and public input?
I'm actually not certain of that at this juncture.
Yeah. And as Kirk indicated, so I'll take this back to the commissioners for feedback. We would, for any boards that we're going to appoint, we generally go through an application process and we present those in the staff meeting, the BOCC staff meeting, at which point, whether the BOCC would accept public comment at the podium in that forum or whether they would just request any public comment through email or through contact would be their option, but that would be the opportunity. So they would, I guess, a long-winded way of saying each commissioner would follow their same process that they do for any other appointee. They may take it to their cab, so that would be to each individual commissioner.
With that, I think we could just leave it.
What's wrong with voting on our approval that we, in concept, agree with it? And send it back to them.
So you have the two options. You have a motion and it's been seconded. So you have the option of carrying through, calling the vote, or you can ask if the individuals who have made that motion would be willing to withdraw that motion.
Well, I withdraw the second.
So
Since we don't need to take official action on this.
They've heard our comments, so they can go from there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Cunningham, would you like any further discussion after this with me on the topic?
Well, not today.
Right.
You could call me.
Okay, if that's okay, I'll contact you and just see what other questions you may have, anything else you'd like to have addressed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, you got anything else?
Thank you all.
Well, yes, sir, I do. It won't be long. So today is the last meeting in August, and so I would propose a round of applause for you, sir, because you've carried out one term as the chairperson for the MAPC. So if you would.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's my last meeting. As chair, I want to thank all the commissioners with the support that they give me through this, as well as staff, including the attorneys. And I guess I'll apologize. I got a little heated with one of the speakers today. But
You did a great job.
No, I think you handled it appropriately.
But I didn't like it. But anyway, thanks.
And thank you, sir, for your service, and would also like to make all the rest of you aware, though, that this means that at the first meeting in September, as is in your bylaws, there will need to be an election for a new chairperson.
We're adjourned.
Vice chair.